Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. If you only have 2 minutes, here's the story. Nodirbek Abdusattorov has just created an amazing feat in the tournament in London, and he steamrolled the elite tournament, going unbeaten and putting together a streak of wins that left him comfortably at the very top. His event performance rating even approached to closely 3,000 level, and the tournament ended with him at 7.5 out of 9. So at the very end, he is the champion of this whole tournament, and with a 2-point lead compared to second place Alireza Firouzja. This is an outstanding performance that he had. And this is one of the most dominant performances we've ever seen in elite chess in 2025, and clinching the 2025 XTX Markets London Chess Classic with a round to spare. This is such an amazing feat. The headline moment came when he forced a draw from a position of strength against Alireza Firouzja, whom both of them are the favorites of this tournament. That single result was enough to lock the title with a round to spare. Across the same weekend also, England enjoyed a strong day in the elite, while in the open it was Indian chess prodigy Pragnananda Ramesh Babu who shared first place, a result that earned him an extra 8.17 FIDE circuit points and moved him that much closer to sealing the final spot in the 2026 candidates. And why it matters: a 2-point margin for Nodirbek at a 10-player elite single round robin is a huge. It's a statement that Abdusattorov is not just winning games, but he is also dominating at top level preparation, middle game technique, and end game conversion all at once. This is just very outstanding. Expect his confidence to soar after this tournament, heading into the speed tournaments and also the rest of the season. And in this video, I'm going to show you guys the very important game that he has played against Alireza Firouzja, who is most likely besides Nodirbek, the strongest player in the field. And so they have 10 players, and as you guys can be interested to look at this players, 10 of them, and most likely Alireza Firouzja and Nodirbek Abdusattorov are the two ones that you guys are familiar with, and they're of course the favorites, but all the other 8 players are also extremely strong elite grandmasters. But today we're going to take a look at this game. This is in round 8, the round before the very last round. It's also really decisive. Besides this game, all of the other games has ended in been very the players played really aggressively and the results are all unexpected. Alright, but now let's jump into this game, which is really decisive and could be giving Nodirbek the chance to win this tournament with a round to spare. And here's with the black pieces. Firouzja starts with the move d4, d5, and we have c4, d takes c4, queen's gambit accepted, e4, e5, knight f3, e takes d4, bishop takes c4. This is all theory. Knight c6, short castle, bishop e6, and here Firouzja spent some time thinking and played this move, bishop takes e6. Now at this point here, in this position, bishop e6 is the main line. There's also moves like bishop c5 and also queen f6 ideas, bishop e6 here, and Firouzja spent some time thinking, about 5 minutes, and decides to take on e6. I think, in my opinion, he definitely knows this line, but he just wanna go for something more different, because here bishop b5 is the main line and the most commonly played. So probably at some point, players, they do want to go out of the opponent's preparation and into a field where it's quite not being prepared much by the players. So here f takes e6 and queen b3 was played. So it looks like at first sight that what is black doing with all of these very ugly pawn structures, and this pawn is under attack at the same time? Isn't black just worse here? Well, actually not. And in this case, black could defend these two pawns at the same time by playing queen c8. But this is not considered the best move in the position because it's quite passive, and the pieces are all now placed quite at a very weird spot. So it is actually possible here to play this move queen d7 as played in the game. This is the main line, and sacrificing a pawn, the pawn on b7 in this case. And here Firouzja takes the pawn, which is possible to take. And after rook b8, queen goes to a6, all forced. It's not like that black is gonna trap white's queen for compensation, but it's the point that black here is much faster in development, and also it's not that easy for the bishop to activate since the rook is eyeing the b2 pawn, unless if white wants to give the pawn back. So here in this case, black plays knight f6 and Firouzja plays knight bd2, developing his knight first. Here Nodirbek plays bishop d6, and here the move a3. A3 seems like a really weird move, but it's actually not. It's one of the best options here. And the point behind this move is that there are some b4 ideas to fee and cat out the bishop this way. And also simply it just prevents any annoying knight b4 ideas to kick this queen. This is a very flexible move, but also at the same time, you could play some b3 ideas to develop the bishop. That's the main purpose of either a3 or b3. So here a3 instead, short castle and the move b4. Very logical, h6, and here h6, I think this is the start of where Nodirbek is out of his preparation as well, because he spent 7 minutes thinking, and h6 is the best move. In this case, and here Firouzja plays the move bishop b2, spending 20 minutes. So obviously now both players, they are relying on their calculations and understanding of the position instead of just memorizing the computer lines, the opening book lines. So here bishop d2 logical, of course, and attacking the d4 pawn. And now it is, of course, black can't really afford to lose another pawn, because if you guys still remember that white has just taken on b7 with the queen. So it's down 2 pawns is just way too much for black. And here black needs to defend the d4 pawn. Very logical here, e5, rook ac1, rook b6. Now this is a mistake considered by the engine, given a question mark. But besides rook b6, which is looking very logical, the only other option for black is to play this move knight d8. But you might just be wondering, knight d8, well, of course, for white, queen takes a7 is not good, even though white is now up 2 pawns. But the point is that this queen is kind of misplaced on a7, and here black can just play this move queen b5. This queen is just simply trapped on a7, can't really go to any available squares. Queen a5 is impossible to go, because after takes, you lose the bishop on b2. And let's say if white, for example, tries to play something like knight c4, and here black's idea is, of course, to play knight e6, and now threatening rook a8 to trap the queen. And even though black is down 2 pawns, but at this point, black's pieces are extremely active, and white is just simply worse here. But instead in the game here of playing knight d8, this move rook b6 was played, which is the second best move. And here there's the move queen a4, knight d8 back, queen b3 check, knight e6. Nodirbek effectively positioned his knight from c6 to e6, which is definitely a much better square than c6, because it has this really nice outpost on f4. And here after this move knight c4, so this is the problem of rook b6 we can see now, because basically after rook b6, white can gain a tempo by playing knight c4 and also attacking the bishop at the same time, the e5 pawn as well. So it could be a little bit annoying. But here Nodirbek, of course, he needs to defend the pawn on e5 and place this move rook b5, defending the pawn. And now knight f d2 was played by Firouzja. At this point, Firouzja only has 31 minutes left on the clock. He already used an hour after playing. How many moves have they played? They've played 18 moves. So, and for Nodirbek, he had a pretty good time management and still has an hour left on the clock with a really decent position. Rook b5 defends the pawn, and a4 is impossible here because there's rook b4. Here, Firouzja probably ran out of ideas, and it's really hard to find a very effective plan for the white pieces. And it's hard to understand why the best move in this position is rook c e1, defending the e4 pawn, but the rook on f1 just seems dead there. And there's some bishop c1, very strange follow-up ideas, but I guess this is really hard to spot as a human playing in an actual game. And instead, knight fd2 was played, maybe at some point with ideas of f4, or just simply to take on d6 and put this knight on c4. And here king h8 was played, g3, so maybe there's some f4 ideas coming, or simply it's just preventing black from going knight f4. Nodirbek plays this move, knight c5, looks really tricky, and it is indeed. Obviously, white cannot take because there's this pin and you lose the queen. But after knight c5, Firouzja played this move queen c2, and suddenly it just seems that this knight on c5 doesn't do anything. And Nodirbek has to either retreat it back to e6, which is the best move in the position, or play this move that he played in the game, d3. Attacks the queen, and the queen now has to go back again, and this knight takes on e4. But this is white is not losing a pawn, it's just that after knight takes e4, knight takes e4, you can take the pawn on d3, and this is like an exchange. But now, as we can see, material is even, and this pawn structure just looks really messy. The rook on b5 just seems really weird, and for white, of course, white is not better at this point, but it looks like that white have some ideas on the e5 pawn, but the point is that white is not better is because white's king is a little bit weak with all of these light squares. So here, after queen d3, this move, knight g5, going directly for white's main problem with the f3 and h3 squares, open for the knight to jump to. And this is a little bit annoying. Also with Nodirbek having a 50-minute advantage. So here, Firouzja plays this move, knight d2. c6 was played to defend the rook, and knight e4, offering a knight trade. But here, Nodirbek says, no, I'm not going to take on e4, because simply this is just good for the white pieces. After queen takes e4, all of black's pawns are on dark squares, and this bishop is just much worse than the bishop on b2, which has a direct target on e5. So of course Nodirbek knows that it is worse if he takes on e4, and instead he plays this really accurate move, rook d5. So sometimes it might seem at first sight that a piece is misplaced, for example the rook on b5, but then after this move c6, suddenly you have this really clear idea of putting the rook on the d5, which is a very strong square. And this rook is now just turning into a completely different character, and this is one of the main advantages that black has. So here Firouzja plays queen e2, and knight f3 check, of course. White is in a little bit of trouble also with only 1 minute left on the clock for Firouzja. Here, queen g4 is coming and winning on the spot if white doesn't prevent knight h4, because it checks the king and also wins the queen on e2. And here, rook c2 was played to defend the queen on e2, but already at this point, white's position is under some pressure. Rook f4, keep on the tension going and attacking this knight on e4. The pawn cannot take because it is being pinned by the queen. And here this move, h3. And actually this is a really big mistake, a decisive one. Probably here the best move is to play bishop c1 to attack this rook, with the idea of after knight h4, king goes to h1, and after rook takes, and here rook takes h4. But at this point, of course, black is up a pawn, and white only has chances to hold for a draw. And definitely this is not what any human wants to see, because you're down a pawn, and even though the engine says that you're okay, But when you're playing, it's not okay, of course, and most likely you're gonna lose this anyways. So of course, as a human, and here for Firouzja, which is a 2700 Grandmaster, he definitely wants counterplay, and he decides to not defend forever, but goes for some attack with the move h3. Now asking this queen, are you going to go or not? So here, of course, black cannot really go back. Well, he could with queen g6, but there's this other move, which is even more attractive. Knight h4 check, of course. The king goes to h2. Well, here Nodirbek decides to repeat the position, king g2. And actually, queen g6 is just a better move. Slightly better move. The point is that after knight takes d6, which is the only move for white to keep the position going, rook takes d6, bishop takes e5, there's a ton of calculation, knight h4 check, king goes to h2, and now this move rook e4 is the point. But this is just so hard to calculate and way too complex to evaluate the position as well. G takes h4, rook takes e2, can you imagine a position like this? And black is of course better, but not winning. White has a rook and a bishop for the queen, but with a very bad pawn structure and a very weak king. But I mean, it's still possible for white to hold the position with some accurate play, although this is just pure nonsense. And in this case, for Nodirbek, it's also quite hard to evaluate whether it is good enough for him, or maybe he just simply didn't find this knight h4, like queen g6, knight h4, rook e4 idea. And unfortunately here, he just plays knight h4, and guess what? King h2, knight f3, king goes to g2, and actually this move king g2, well, king g2, king h2 back and forth is just forced, and Firouzja doesn't really need to think about it. Knight h4, king h2, there's even queen g6 options here, because you can't really take the rook because there's mate in 1, but you can take the knight as well because there's rook e4 and you lose. But unfortunately here, instead of going for all of these complex lines, tactical lines, instead Nodirbek just decides to play knight f3, king g2 with a threefold repetition. This game just ended in a draw, with actually Nodirbek having a very close to a winning advantage. But after this game, he had a draw and he is already 7 out of 8. And Firouzja is 5 out of 8 in second place. But guess what? Nodirbek is just in a 2-point lead and already the champion. So he has 1 game to spare. He can even just don't come to the last game and win the tournament anyways. But of course, this draw is fine for him. And of course, if both players are in a must-win situation, Nodirbek would definitely go for queen g6. But at this point, he is just in a very comfortable situation, and a draw just doesn't really affect the whole ranking standard, like the standings. So it's fine for him. And with this draw, it's actually a really beautiful game. He is the champion of this tournament, and yeah, a great tournament for him. He had nearly a performance rating of close to 3000. So that is a lot, like a very outstanding performance for him. So now, congratulations for him on winning this tournament. For Firouzja, he actually didn't lose a game as well, but had more draws than Nodirbek did. So unfortunately for him, not his best performance. And this tournament is definitely Nodirbek's stage. And well, we hope that he will play even more outstanding games in the following tournaments in the season, and also for Firouzja. Alright, but now I hope you guys enjoyed my recap of this beautiful game, and thank you as well for watching this video. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!